They were 31,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean when the first warning light flickered on. The horizontal stabilizer, the massive surface at the tail of the aircraft that keeps a plane level in flight, had jammed. For the 88 souls aboard Alaska Airlines Flight 261, this malfunction would trigger a sequence of events so catastrophic, so impossible to survive, that even the most experienced pilots in the world couldn't save them. This is the story of how a 2-foot piece of metal, worn down over thousands of flights, became a critical failure point. This is the story of Alaska Airlines Flight 261. January 31st, 2000. It was supposed to be a routine flight, the kind of trip people make thousands of times a day without incident. Puerto Vallarta to San Francisco, then on to Seattle. Sun-soaked vacationers heading home, airline employees using their travel benefits, families reuniting. Among the passengers were business leaders, journalists, authors, young families with small children, couples celebrating anniversaries, and friends on vacation together. But this wasn't just a flight of strangers. At least 35 people aboard were connected to Alaska Airlines or its sister carrier, Horizon Air. 12 were direct employees. As is common practice among airlines, employees and their families were using travel benefits, heading home from Mexican vacations. The tight-knit airline community would be devastated by what was about to happen. The cockpit crew were veterans. The captain, 53 years old, had logged 17,750 flight hours, with over 4,000 on the MD-80 series. An Air Force veteran who'd flown cargo planes for 8 years, he was a flight safety instructor, the kind of pilot other pilots looked up to. His first officer was 57 and just 2 years from retirement. With over 8,000 hours on MD-80 aircraft and 20 years flying Navy transport planes, he'd seen it all. Or so he thought. 3 flight attendants completed the crew. One was 26, newly married, and living her dream job. Another was 33, a single mother who loved to travel. The third was 30, traveling with his partner, who was seated in the cabin as a passenger. These 5 crew members had no idea they were flying an airplane with a critical mechanical issue that had been developing for years. The McDonnell Douglas MD-83, tail number November 963 Alpha Sierra, had been delivered to Alaska Airlines in 1992. By the time of this flight, it had accumulated 26,584 flight hours. The plane departed Puerto Vallarta at 1:37 p.m. Pacific Time and climbed smoothly to its cruising altitude of 31,000 feet. The flight was scheduled to land in San Francisco in less than 4 hours. Everything seemed normal. But hidden inside the tail of the aircraft, a mechanical issue was developing. Deep within the horizontal stabilizer assembly was a component called the jackscrew. This steel screw, just 22 inches long and 1.5 inches in diameter, was critical to controlling the aircraft's pitch. As it rotated through a threaded copper alloy nut, it moved the horizontal stabilizer up or down, keeping the plane stable in flight. This system had been designed with redundancy. 2 independent sets of threads, each strong enough to carry the load. Maintenance procedures like regular lubrication and wear checks were supposed to catch any problems before they became critical. However, over the years, the time between maintenance procedures had been extended. Between 1985 and 1996, the intervals between jackscrew lubrications and inspections had progressively increased, each time with FAA approval. The original lubrication interval was every 500 flight hours. By July 1996, that had been extended to 8 calendar months, which equated to 2,550 flight hours. The end play checks, critical inspections to measure thread wear, had been extended from every other C-check to every 30 months, equivalent to 9,550 flight hours. The manufacturer's recommendation was no more than 7,200 flight hours between inspections. By the time Flight 261 took off from Puerto Vallarta, a significant amount of the threads in the jackscrew's Acme nut had worn away. The threads were deteriorating at a rate much faster than the expected wear rate, and there was insufficient lubrication on the jackscrew. The stage was set for a catastrophic failure. At around 3:49 p.m., about 2 hours into the flight, the pilots noticed something was wrong. The horizontal stabilizer had jammed. The trim system, which should make subtle adjustments to keep the plane level, wasn't responding. At their cruising altitude and speed, the pilots had to pull on their control yokes with considerable force just to keep the plane level. They tried the primary trim system. Nothing. They tried the alternate system. Still nothing. The captain contacted Alaska Airlines Dispatch and Maintenance Control. The pilots and mechanics on the ground began troubleshooting, running through checklists, trying to figure out what was wrong. The root cause remained elusive. After careful consideration, the pilots made the decision to divert to Los Angeles instead of continuing to San Francisco. At 4:09 p.m., they tried one more time to free the jammed stabilizer using the primary trim system. This time, it worked. The stabilizer broke free. But what happened next changed everything. Freed from its jam, the stabilizer immediately moved to an extreme nose-down position. The aircraft pitched over into an almost vertical dive. The plane plummeted from 31,500 feet to between 23,000 and 24,000 feet in just 80 seconds. 6,000 feet per minute. The passengers and flight attendants were thrown around the cabin as loose items flew through the air. In the cockpit, both pilots were pulling back on their controls with all their strength, 130 to 140 pounds of force. "Help me back! Help me back!" the captain called out. Somehow, through sheer physical effort and skill, they managed to arrest the dive and stabilize the aircraft at about 24,400 feet. The captain's voice came over the intercom, trying to reassure the terrified passengers about the flight control situation they were working to resolve. The crew knew they were in serious trouble. They requested to descend to 10,000 feet over the ocean, away from populated areas, to try to configure the aircraft for landing. They needed to test whether they could still control the plane. Air traffic control granted their request. Other aircraft in the area were alerted to maintain visual contact with the stricken jet. The pilots decided not to attempt any further corrections to the runaway trim. They would try to land the plane as it was. They began descending, preparing for an approach into Los Angeles International Airport. But deep in the tail of the aircraft, the jackscrew assembly was under incredible stress. The remaining threads in the Acme nut were bearing loads they were never designed to withstand. At 4:19 p.m., the cockpit voice recorder captured a series of distinct thumps. 17 seconds later, an extremely loud noise. The jackscrew assembly had failed completely. The threads had stripped entirely. The jackscrew separated from the nut that held it in place. The horizontal stabilizer failed at 17,800 feet. Without it, the aircraft had no pitch control. The plane pitched 70 degrees nose down and began rolling to the left, entering a death spiral. Pilots in nearby aircraft watched in horror. "That plane has just started to do a big, huge plunge," one radioed to air traffic control. Another reported, "Yes, sir, I concur. He is definitely in a nose-down position, descending quite rapidly."
Hi, 0 Delta X-ray. That plane has just started to do a big, huge plunge.
A big, huge plunge. Thank you. Skywest 5154. The MD-80 is one becoming about 2 o'clock, about 10 miles now. Another pilot reports he's really looking pretty bad. They're heading to your right. Do you see him?
Yes, sir. I concur. He is definitely in a nose-down position, descending quite rapidly.
Okay, very good. Keep your eye on him. Alaska 261, are you here with us yet, sir?
Plane's inverted, sir.
Okay, very good. It looks like he's turning over in front of you now, Skywest 5154. You still got your eyes on him, sir?
Definitely out of control.
Inside the cockpit, the two pilots were fighting for their lives and the lives of their passengers. The cockpit voice recorder captured their desperate struggle. Push and roll, push and roll, the captain commanded, trying to perform an upset recovery maneuver. They managed to increase the pitch from -70 degrees to -28. Okay, we are inverted, and now we gotta get it, he said. The plane was upside down. For the next minute, completely inverted and still diving at a 9-degree pitch, the crew struggled to roll the plane back over. Push, push, push. Push the blue side up, the captain called out. Okay, now let's kick rudder. Left rudder, left rudder. The first officer responded, I can't reach it. The forces on the aircraft were too great. The captain replied, okay, right rudder, right rudder. 18 seconds later, he said, gotta get it over again. At least upside down we're flying. Artemov. It was an extraordinary moment. These two experienced pilots, in the final minute of their lives, were attempting to fly a commercial airliner upside down. And for a brief moment, it almost worked. Flying inverted, they nearly stopped the plane's descent. But they had lost too much altitude in the initial dive. They were at less than 10,000 feet now, the plane inverted, still descending, and there was no time left. A few seconds before 4:21 p.m., Flight 261 hit the Pacific Ocean at high speed, about 2.7 miles north of Anacapa Island, between Port Hueneme and the Channel Islands. The impact was catastrophic. The aircraft was destroyed instantly. All 88 people on board, 2 pilots, 3 flight attendants, and 83 passengers were killed by blunt force trauma. Pilots in the vicinity reported what they witnessed. And he's just hit the water, one said. Yes, sir, he hit the water. The massive search and recovery operation began immediately. The U.S. Navy's amphibious transport dock, USS Cleveland, rushed to the scene. Using side-scan sonar, remotely operated vehicles, and a commercial fishing trawler, recovery teams eventually retrieved about 85% of the fuselage, including the tail section, both engines, the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder. Due to the extreme impact forces, only a few bodies were found intact. All victims had to be identified through fingerprints, dental records, tattoos, personal items, and anthropological examination. When investigators examined the recovered jackscrew assembly, what they found was revealing. The steel jackscrew was no longer mated with its nut. Wrapped around it like a slinky were metallic filaments, the remnants of the Acme nut's threads. The entire thread had stripped out, and there was no grease on any of the moving parts. No lubrication at all. The jackscrew had been running metal on metal, wearing away the softer copper alloy threads. The National Transportation Safety Board's investigation uncovered important findings about the maintenance history of the aircraft. They found that when the jackscrew was last lubricated at San Francisco in September 1999, the task took significantly less time than the manufacturer estimated it should take. The evidence suggested the task may not have been performed to specification, but laboratory testing showed the excessive wear couldn't have accumulated in just the 4 months since that maintenance procedure. The wear pattern indicated ongoing issues over a longer period. The September 1997 end play check, the last inspection for thread wear before the accident, had not detected the excessive deterioration. Investigators found that non-standard tools were being used for these measurements, and testing revealed these tools could produce inaccurate readings. If manufacturer-specified tools had been used with accurate measurements, the excessive wear would likely have been discovered and the jackscrew assembly replaced. The investigation also revealed that maintenance intervals had been extended without comprehensive technical data to fully support the changes. The FAA had approved these extensions as part of standard regulatory processes. In April 2000, just months after the crash, a special NTSB inspection uncovered various maintenance program deficiencies that had not been previously identified through regular oversight. There was also a design consideration. The jackscrew assembly had been certified without a fail-safe mechanism. The designers had operated under the assumption that maintenance would catch wear before failure, and that at least one set of threads would always be present. The possibility that wear mechanisms could affect both sets of threads simultaneously, and that such wear might not be detected, had not been fully considered in the original design certification. The probable cause, according to the NTSB, was a loss of airplane pitch control resulting from the in-flight failure of the horizontal stabilizer trim system jackscrew assembly's Acme nut threads. The thread failure was caused by excessive wear resulting from insufficient lubrication. Contributing factors included extended lubrication intervals and the approval of those extensions, extended end play check intervals and the approval of those extensions, and the absence of a fail-safe mechanism on the MD-80 to prevent the catastrophic effects of total Acme nut thread loss. The NTSB issued 24 safety recommendations. The lubrication schedule for the MD-80 family was immediately changed to every 650 hours. Pilots were instructed not to attempt troubleshooting beyond checklist procedures when dealing with flight control malfunctions. The FAA revised its processes for approving maintenance interval extensions, and recommendations were made for fail-safe mechanisms on jackscrew assemblies. In 1998, 2 years before the crash, concerns had been raised internally about maintenance practices at the airline. A mechanic had reported issues to federal authorities, leading to an investigation. This same mechanic had specifically recommended that the jackscrew on the accident aircraft be replaced during a maintenance check. But this recommendation was not implemented. Federal prosecutors later decided not to file criminal charges related to the crash. Both Boeing, which had acquired McDonnell Douglas in 1997, and Alaska Airlines accepted liability for the crash. Settlements with victims' families exceeded $300 million, with individual settlements ranging from a couple million to $20 million, among the largest ever in an aviation disaster. Alaska Airlines retired its entire fleet of MD-80s in 2008, transitioning to an all-Boeing 737 fleet. The two pilots were posthumously awarded the Airline Pilots Association Gold Medal for Heroism. In those final minutes, they did everything humanly possible to save their aircraft and passengers. They kept fighting until the very end, attempting maneuvers that no airline pilot should ever have to perform. A scholarship fund was established in their memory. A memorial sundial was constructed at Port Hueneme on the California coast. The names of all 88 victims are engraved on bronze plates around its perimeter. Every January 31st, at exactly 4:22 p.m., the sundial casts a shadow on the memorial plaque, marking the precise moment Flight 261 hit the water. In Seattle, a public park was renovated in honor of families who died in the crash, with a children's playground dedicated to their memory. The tragedy of Alaska Airlines Flight 261 stands as a reminder of the critical importance of aircraft maintenance and regulatory oversight. It highlighted the need for proper maintenance procedures, accurate inspections, and comprehensive safety systems. The investigation revealed gaps in how maintenance intervals were approved and how wear on critical components was monitored. 88 people died that day because a critical component wore out. The mechanical failure had multiple contributing factors, insufficient lubrication being primary among them, combined with extended maintenance intervals and inspection procedures that failed to detect the deteriorating condition before it reached a critical point. In the years since, aviation safety has continued to evolve. The lessons from Flight 261 have led to changes across the industry in maintenance practices, inspection procedures, regulatory oversight, and aircraft design. New fail-safe mechanisms have been developed. Maintenance interval approval processes have been reformed. The understanding of how critical components can fail has deepened. But the fundamental principle remains unchanged. In aviation, safety requires constant vigilance, proper maintenance procedures, thorough inspections, and effective regulatory oversight. The complexity of modern aircraft means that every component, every procedure, and every inspection matters. Small issues can cascade into major failures if not caught in time. Alaska Airlines Flight 261 crashed into the Pacific Ocean on January 31, 2000, at 4:21 p.m. All 88 souls aboard were lost. The investigation that followed revealed important lessons about maintenance practices, inspection procedures, and the need for fail-safe design in critical aircraft systems. These lessons have helped make aviation safer, ensuring that the tragedy serves as a lasting reminder of why rigorous safety standards and practices are essential in commercial aviation. This is their story. May the lessons learned honor their memory.